Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Utopia Season 1, Episode 5. It's called Order 2472. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. And this episode accomplished essentially two main plot lines that it was really focusing on. One, of course, was the Stearns medical stuff in the quarantine zone with the twins and that whole kind of charade. And then, of course, we had the main group and Arby's kind of eventual turn at the end, which is an interesting way, direction to take this in. I think Arby is a very interesting character to watch and unfold, and he's not someone that's going to be redeemed, like, at least not fully. He can't be, because right before he makes his choice to essentially help Jessica, he's more of a chaotic neutral. I don't know, but right before he makes the choice to help Jessica at the end, he does shoot Alice's mother, like, very coldly, in a way that is unrelenting and is impossible to, it's impossible to sort of root for him in any way, shape, or form, at least for a long time, without significant redemption. And I don't see that happening. I kind of see him more as this weird, chaotic middle ground now, where he's not necessarily all for the interests of Christie and what the bad guy's plans are, but he isn't a good character either. He's not a good person. Yeah, I shouldn't say good character. He is a good character, but he's not a good person. And I think this is a great way of adding sort of a kind of a wild card into the mix, because I feel like at this point now we're halfway through the season, and it kind of established what the show was, established who the characters are, establishes what the rules are, and dare I say, it was almost to a point where it was starting to feel a little bit like we'd settled in too much, and it was kind of obvious where certain things were going. And I'll talk about some of those things in the episode, but having him flip like this and not necessarily do what he's supposed to, which is obviously set up from last episode, his scream at the end of last episode certainly put us on the path with him that we could see him making a choice that was going against Christie at some point, and indeed he did in this episode. And it makes me realize, especially when he says to Jessica, "If you need to find me, I'll be at home." The home she's been looking for, certainly paints the picture that Jessica herself was one of these kids, maybe not with a group of kids in the same way that the others seem to be, in this Christie-led home, but certainly part of the same system, part of the same world, and I think we'll see more of that going forward. So I was into that stuff. For sure. Jessica versus Arby as well felt very like mano a mano. It felt very equal. They were constantly one upping each other. It was kind of funny in places too. That moment where he points two guns at her and she just gives him the finger in between the two guns. In a very intentional way. It's not even a delayed reaction. It's kind of like that thing where people are sparring with guns and then they sort of end in a sort of standoff moment. Like, the intention for the end of the standoff from her was always to give him the finger. It made it especially kind of funny, but. He points out that they both have the same guns. He even makes her food so that she can go off with Alice, with Utopia, because she's there, of course, to get Utopia with Grant, who's helped her find this place. He doesn't have a street name or anything. He has to find it, and obviously they have trouble moving around because Grant is painted as a mass shooter on TV. That was kind of at the end of the last episode was setting up, and it's actually kind of fascinating watching Alice and her mother's reaction when they see it on the news, and of course them calling the police because they're they're relatively good citizens who want to help track down and give the police the information they need to find this mass shooter, and that's actually what leads Arby to them, because he hears it in the police scanner and he goes and kills all these police officers before Alice's mum. But we have Grant having to hide, and he's got the hat on, and Jessica and him are hiding the arcade machine from the policeman and all sorts. It gives the episode some chaotic energy, and I think it's one of those things where the show's kind of already played its hand at how dark it's willing to get, so nothing's really surprising me anymore. But yeah, I mean, there's a moment that I appreciate, that even if I'm not surprised with how much the show's willing to go to now, I appreciate the characters still feeling like they're reacted appropriately. In particular, Grant's reaction when he sees on TV his own photo and he hears his name being called, the youngest mass shooter in US history. And he just, he drops like an F-bomb and says, "What the F?" And it's a good reaction. It's otherwise entertaining per se, but it feels appropriate and it feels suitably kind of like, what the hell? Out of nowhere, this happens, and this leads to the others in the group. Wilson finds out what happened to his family. Ian's family's been poisoned. They're not dead yet, but they're in critical care. And there's no family to kill with Becky, which makes Wilson kind of suspicious. He accuses her of being maybe a mole or something like that. Which is particularly hard to sort of hear because this is right after she's been off to the side with Ian having an episode with her illness, and Ian kind of been there to console her and hold her, and her trying to kind of like say, hey, this isn't get a cure, it's not going away, as if to say, you're wasting your time bothering with me, only for Ian to kind of hold her hand and, without saying the words, essentially say that he doesn't care, he's going to be there for her. That's not, it's typical stuff. It's typical, one person's sick, the other person who loves them is like, no, like I don't care, like I'm not leaving you alone, and it's not just about what I get out of this. That's not what this is. So I thought their moments were sweet. Had a couple of really good moments. One later on the couch as well, but the moments in the bathtub were pretty touching. And I've said since the start of the show that these characters being likable is one of its biggest strengths. Maybe a slight negative for this episode and the last one, which I think notably the pacing has changed since the first three. The first three felt like it was like just unrelentingly impressive, just how much it was going through in terms of plot. These last two definitely feel like they're a bit slower and they feel a bit more typical in terms of TV pacing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think one of the ways that I'm noticing it more than others is that the main group of characters haven't had as much to do these last couple of episodes. It feels like it's taking one or two and doing something with them. It's spending a lot of time with Jessica, and we're spending a lot of time with the villains. And I think that might be the sad truth about the middle of this season, is that the first episodes were so good before we introduced, or at least before we spent a lot of time with Christy, and we didn't really have much of Jessica yet. Jessica, obviously just barely appears in episode 1, and she's this kind of chaotic extra element in episode 2 and even 3 to an extent. And these last couple episodes have really dialed up how much we get of Christy and how much we get of Stearns, and I do think that's taken away a little bit of time from the characters that I do find especially likable and that I want to see kind of survive and stumble their way into outsmarting the bad guys and pulling out a victory. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy Jessica's mystery, because I am enjoying it more than I was before. But I don't think I like her as much as I do the main group. I mean, the main group, I mean, Wilson, Ian, and Becky. I feel like they're the ones that are the heart of the show, and I suppose Grant to an extent as well. And maybe Alice can kind of bundle in there with that because she was pretty likable too. But Jessica has kind of become the focus of the show. She has become the character who seems to always have a plot line throughout each episode. Here it's going for Utopia with Grant. And that's totally fine. Like, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but it is taking away time from the characters that I kind of made me like the show in the first place. I think episode 1 was so strong, and it's kind of funny to look back on and sort of see that, yeah, episode 1 didn't have all these other elements that are now taking up a lot of time in the show, and we spent so much time in that first episode with these specific characters. And I can't Arby in that. Now, Arby's not likable, of course, he's the villain, but Arby was so good in those first couple episodes as well, and he's probably the best part of this episode, actually. His reactions, the way he plays off Jessica, the way he kind of almost realizes that he's fighting an equal, but knows that he's going to win because that's his purpose. And there's so much talk in this about the purpose and all the rest of it. And so and like I said, I'm a little bit numb to the dark stuff, just because when there's a moment with what's his name, Stearns, Ray Wilson's character, when he's with this dad and his daughter, and the dad's trying to argue for him to use the vaccine to test it on his daughter, because it's a Hail Mary at this point. His speech was so kind of on the nose that I actually kind of like got that there was something weird about this, that he was suspicious. And it wasn't like that much in advance of them revealing that this was on behalf of Christy and that there was something afoot here. And of course, as soon as he leaves, the twin comes in, and we get this idea that they're both completely fine, and that they've got some sort of game plan, which obviously is a bit more clear by the end of the episode, about one of the twins, uh, you know, being sick and them faking the fact that the vaccine works by having the twins swap after the first one is died, which is obviously pretty dark. But like I say, I'm almost desensitized to this point of the evil shit that these characters, these villains, will do, and I think that's because of the end of last episode. The end of last episode was such a gut punch in terms of what the characters accomplished that this, by comparison, bizarrely, didn't even feel that bad. It was kind of like, you've got this, essentially, these kids that have been raised in this cult, for lack of a better word, and she's like, you should be proud of me, surrogate father. I'm fulfilling my purpose. How many people get to say they've fulfilled their purpose? And she's gun ho about taking one for the team. They get this final feast, and Christy hugs her and is proud of her, and it's all these things now. It's so they give her something so that she's got it in her system, and the first blood test reveals the virus, of course, for Christy. Not for Christy, sorry, for Stearns. And then, of course, they switch out the kids, and all of a sudden, this new kid, her blood's completely fine. This treatment's a miracle drug. And it's all political. It's all about convincing the world that they should move forward with this vaccine, and it's all about, maybe more so in this case, convincing Stearns, because Stearns was against moving forward too quickly. And having saved a life, seeing this father thank him as if he's just saved the world, and then in front of this crowd that are chanting, release the vaccine, and Thomas is there, Christie's there, they are rallying up the crowd and getting them to chant various things at the FDA lady who's there, to the point where Stearns buys into all this, almost buys into his own ego a little bit, but kind of buys into the hysteria of it, and starts to chant along with them, and becomes like a face of this vaccine to the public, which might end up really badly if depending on what this vaccine's actually going to do. And given that Thomas makes this order, which we see at the end of the episode as a bunch of bunnies and cages being transported somewhere, I can't imagine that this is their end game by any means. They're doing something with this virus. They're doing something with this, and making people convinced that there's a cure when there really isn't definitely seems to be part of the game plan. So I'm not entirely sure what they're doing, and maybe the answers will be in Utopia when they get a chance to analyze it a little bit. Next episode. It won't be a full week till the next one, I promise. Yeah, so I think the episode moved well enough. It's kind of one of these weird things where it's almost that it's slowing down a little bit here in the middle of the season in a way that it feels worse than it probably is, because those first 3 episodes were so, like, had so much momentum. And I do think the first 2 episodes specifically are still the 2 best episodes, and I do feel a little bit, not a lull, I think that's maybe a bit harsh, but as we get into some of the weeds of the villain plot and John Cusack, and yeah, there is some interesting stuff about him, like the cult is, in the way he's brainwashed everyone, is kind of interesting, and is kind of this horrific idea. And he definitely seems to be a villain who does believe he's doing the right thing, this kind of Watchmen-esque, or we have to kill X number of people to solve things, or even Thanos, if you want to put it that way, the balance and all the rest of it. Like, I can definitely see him fitting into that kind of mold. But yeah, but I do think these middle episodes, now that I've seen 4 and 5 as a pair, because I had a little bit of the sentiment last episode. I think I felt it even more so in this episode, and I imagine I might feel it again going forward, and maybe not. Maybe it'll upswing from here in terms of momentum. Which is not to say that I'm not enjoying it still. There's still things to like, and still things to enjoy as a streaming TV show. But I don't feel quite the special energy that I think it had in the first couple, which is a shame. But yeah, it's still got great moments. It's still got these moments with Jessica and Arby at the end, Grant finding out what they're doing, saying on the news about him. It's got these elements that are really, really strong, and kind of really sort of tentpole the episodes a little bit. But the first couple didn't need tentpoles. They were just kind of up there the whole time. I guess I don't know where I'm going with this analogy, but yeah. So you know, enjoying it. You know, I think it's still very much in the worth watching and enjoyable category, but it's maybe not quite the amazing show that I was thinking it was going to be in the first couple thus far. But then again, maybe the last couple will upswing again, and we'll have this kind of uneven overall show that has a lot of enough reasons why it's highly recommending. But we'll see. But that is basically my thoughts on episode 5. But it is notable that I don't have as much to say on this one specifically. That's Utopia episode 5. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support everything we do, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv. And you can support us for as little as $1 per month. Or as I said, hit the like button. That's the free way of doing it. And is much, much appreciated. So thank you once again. I will see you next time. It has been a pleasure. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?